Before we start, please take a moment to read through this disclaimer. Here's a summary for you. All the content in this meeting is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. Any trades or specific companies discussed during the session are examples and should not be taken as a trade advice. All the content is of general nature and does not address the circumstances of any particular individual or entity. Before acting on any information you gather from this session, you must consult a professional advisor to confirm if the action is appropriate for you. All right, let's get started. All right, so today we're going to talk about very basic of an option contract. So what's an option contract? It's a legal contract between two parties, A and B, in which one party, say A, agrees to buy or sell a security from other party B. But the price is predefined in the contract, and that contract is valid only up to certain date, right? So it's like if I'm transacting with Jane and I agree, in which I say, Jane, I'll buy this shares from you at this price all the way before January 15th, whenever you want to sell it. So that is an option contract. Okay, we'll dig a little more deeper into this with some more examples. So to make it more clear, there are two types of option contracts you would see: call option, put option. Every other type of option strategy, and there are many, you can go as complicated as you want to, are being built upon just these two basic option strategies: call option, put option. And if you can get a good understanding, if we can master put and call, then using those two Lego blocks, we can construct whatever type of house we want to. We can construct iron butterfly strategy. We can construct strangles, straddles, iron condors, Batmans, jade lizard. There can be many names, many fancy names you can give. But the fact is, the building blocks, if you dissect any of those strategies, in the end, like in any object, you got proton, neutron, electron. Here you got put and calls at the end. So these are the two building blocks. We will spend maybe first 2 sessions of boot camp only on these two and look at an option strategy in which we use these two. So let's try to understand how the option contract really works, but without talking about options. So I want to take an example which we all are very familiar with, which is house. Some of you might have gone through the whole process of house buying. Some of you have already owned the house. So here we are taking an example in which Martha, she owns a home which is worth $500,000. She's definitely not in Bay Area. To protect her investment in her home, she wants to buy an insurance policy because she thinks, house could get damaged in snow, in hurricane, in flood. So what happens? Matthew comes along and Matthew offers her a policy for 1 year and insure the house for $500,000. Means Matthew will enter into a contract and tell Martha that I'll buy your house for $500,000 whenever you want, but up to 1 year. But I'll charge you a premium of $40,000. You will have a privilege to give this house to me at $500,000. But for that privilege, you will have to pay $40,000. So what happens? Matthew will write that insurance policy. I mean, we all are familiar with this. Those who are homeowners get an insurance policy. Those who are vehicle owners, we get car insurance policy. So Matthew writes the insurance policy. Martha buys the policy. And Matthew gets the money. That's the end game. So what we just witnessed is type an option contract. But the question is, why would Martha do this? Right? People generally say, is option trading or option investing, is it a zero-sum game? In my opinion, it is not. And let's look at why it is not a zero-sum game. What did Martha gain from this? So Martha's viewpoint was, if a house suffers damage, I can still sell it to Matthew and get back my $500,000. So she bought peace of mind. She don't have to worry about her asset, which is $500,000. She protected her asset by paying some premium. Why did Matthew enter into this transaction? So Matthew's viewpoint was, he's an insurance guy. He's got his colleague who's an actuary, can go back and look at the data of how much the damage could happen to a house in this area, in this zip code, house with this sort of a construction, and house which has been built in this time frame. And Matthew knows that the statistics show that most of the time the damage to such house will be less than $40,000. So if Martha sells the house back to him, he can get it repaired in an amount less than $40,000, sell it back for $500,000 and retain the remaining money. So the remaining amount becomes profit for Matthew. So in this transaction, both the parties have their own valid reasons of why they entered into this transaction. So it's not a zero-sum game. Both the parties have something to gain from this. So whatever we just saw, which is what we do every day in our lives, is an example of a put option contract transaction. Okay, so let's break it up. So what did Matthew do? He wrote a policy. Let's call the policy that he wrote an option contract. He sold it to Martha. And as per that policy, Martha can sell or can put the house to Matthew. Right? Martha is putting the house over to Matthew at $500,000. And I'll come back to these terms. These terms are specific to option trades. When you're looking at any option trade, you will hear or you will see the fact, what's the strike price? What's the period? What's an expiration period? What's the premium? So I'm just trying to dissect here and say, these transactions that we all are familiar with and we all enter every year, either for our car or for our house, it's nothing but an option contract. It's a legal contract. So as per this, Martha can put the house to Matthew. Matthew is a seller of contract, right? He's a seller of the insurance policy. And she can put the house to Matthew at $500,000 because that's the price that they agreed upon, which is called a strike price in any option contract. Within 1 year, this privilege is valid only for 1 year. After 1 year, when the clock ticks over in the midnight, it's gone. If your house gets damaged a minute after the midnight, sorry, your policy expired. You don't have that privilege anymore. So this is valid only up to a certain date and time, and that is called expiration period. Now, for this consideration, for getting this privilege, Martha had to pay 40K premium to Matthew. And we will look into, one of an option chain and create an option rate, which is exactly like this. We'll talk about all these elements. So this is an example of a put option contract. I took an example from real estate or an insurance because most of us are very familiar with how these insurance contracts work. Okay. So what is a put option contract? It's a contract that gives the buyer of the put contract, buyer of the option contract, an ability to sell the stock. Okay. Just to differentiate between the buying of a contract or buying of a policy and buying of what that policy protect. In real estate case, you buy an insurance policy so that you can sell the house. In stock cases, you buy an option contract which will give you ability to sell the stock at a specified price within the specified time period. For this choice, the option contract buyer, in this case, Martha was the buyer of the privilege. She was the buyer of the contract. She was the buyer of the policy. The buyer has to pay premium to the seller or to the policy writer. Like in the insurance case, it's the insurance company that is the policy writer. In this case, the option seller or option writer, you will see these terms used interchangeably. So when they enter into an option contract, the buyer of an option contract pays a premium to the option seller. But then option seller is obligated to buy the stock at the specified price that they agreed upon in the contract. Anytime when the buyer chooses to exercise her right, right? He got a premium. Matthew got a premium, and along with the premium, then he is obligating himself that he will buy the house at $500,000 whenever Martha chooses to sell the house on or before the expiration date. So to enter into that obligation, because he's putting himself under obligation, he got money, he got a premium. So let's look at the option contract main elements, right? Number one, in any option contract, and I'll open up my trading platform, I'll show you, some of these elements so that it is clear. By the way, the trading platform which I will be using is Think or Swim from TD Ameritrade. You could be having different one, but irrespective of what trading platform you are on, what brokerage you are working with, every option contract will always have minimum these elements. Number one, the contract will define what stock are we talking about? Which house are we insuring? What's the house address? Is it Snap? Is it Facebook? Is it Google? Is it Caterpillar? What stock are we insuring against? One thing which is important in options is that one option contract has got 100 shares underneath it. Generally. Later sessions, we can talk about what happens if the stock splits or if there is a reverse split. Those are very different scenarios. But generally speaking, one option contract has got 100 shares in it. That doesn't mean that every option contract behaves like 100 shares. We'll talk about that when we will talk about delta. But for now, let's say one option contract has got 100 shares in it. Date of expiration, how long is this contract valid? What is the strike price? In a house case, it was $500,000. In Snap, if you want to enter into an option contract at 45, you could choose to enter at 45. Doesn't really matter where the stock is currently trading in market. You can pick up at what price you want to protect or at what price you're okay to buy. It will tell you what the type of the contract is. Is it a put or is it a call? And then lastly, what's the amount of premium involved in this? So these are the basic main elements of any option contract. I do see a question. The question is, in a bear market, does the stock owner have to pay the premium instead to lock the price? It doesn't matter whether it's a bear market or a bull market. If you're an option contract buyer, you always pay a premium. Option buyer pays a premium, option seller gets a premium. That's it. It has nothing to do with the market direction or where the market is going. If you are buying something, you're getting a right to do something. You're getting a privilege to do something. Nothing is free in this world. To get that privilege, you gotta pay money. And the person who is giving you the privilege, he gets the money. He or she gets the money. So the seller of an option receives the money. The buyer of the option gives the money. So hope that answers. Okay. I know sometimes they get confusing because, again, these are two different things, the options and the stock underneath it. Just like the insurance policy and the house are two different things. You can buy or sell the insurance policy, right? Mostly us, we buy insurance policy and the agent sells the insurance policy. Similarly, in this option contract, you can buy and sell. You can do both. You can buy and sell the option contract. But what that contract does to the stock or what privilege it gives you, that could be different. And that's where the call and the put, that's the type of a contract which will define what privilege do you hold if you are buying it, or what obligation do you have if you are selling it. If you're selling a put, your obligation is to buy the stock when it is put to you. Matthew sold a put option, or let's say a put insurance policy. He obligated himself that he will buy the house when Martha wants to put the house to him. Call is different. Okay. So we will talk about call later. Today, I just want to focus on put and the one very basic trading strategy using put. Okay. Hope till now it makes sense. Let's move on. Other thing quickly want to talk about is, I briefly touched upon it, that if you are an option buyer, you have a right. And it's called, you have a right to exercise it, right? If I'm an insurance policy buyer, I have a right to exercise the terms of insurance policy. In case of the example that we saw, the terms of insurance policy says, I can put the house to Matthew for $500,000. So buyer has a right to exercise the contract. The seller, they will be assigned the contract. They have an obligation to perform as per what they agreed in the contract once that contract is assigned to them. Okay. So these two terms you would read or you would hear is exercise and assignment. If you are buying an option contract, then you have to go through exercise process. If you are selling an option contract, you have to keep in your back of mind that when can you get assigned the contract. If it is not exercised, contract would expire worthless. Take our example. Nothing happens to the house. It's all sunshine. No rain, no sleet, no snow, no floods. House is cool. Why would Martha sell the house back to Matthew? She had an option. She had an insurance policy. She had an option to sell the house to Matthew, but she chose not to. So the contract expired. Unless she wants to renew it for the next expiration period. In that case, if no action happens, contract is said to have expired worthless. If the buyer didn't exercise, so the seller was never assigned, whatever initial amount that the buyer had paid to seller, that remains with the seller. Okay. So these three terms, keep in the back of your mind. I'll talk again and again about it in the subsequent sessions. Exercise, assignment, and worthless expiration. Okay. By the way, there is one session which we will cover the whole exercise and the assignment process and how it actually works in real life. All right, so takeaways from this one. Option contract is a legal agreement. Once you have bought or sold an option contract, you can't back away from it. You have to close the contract. I mean, if you bought a contract, you can sell it back. If you sold a contract, you can buy it back to close the transactions. But if you're still holding an option contract all the way to expiration, remember it is valid up to a certain date. Then if you are seller, you get assigned, you need to do your part, what you've obligated to. If you are a buyer, you have a right, you can choose whether to make use of your right or not. But it's a legal agreement. Buyer has a right, seller has obligation. So buyer will exercise the right. Instead of will, I should put buyer may exercise the right. Many times buyer may not even exercise its right because it's not profitable. And seller will be assigned the obligation. They will be assigned the contract and they have to do their part, what they've agreed upon. If it is not exercised, it expires worthless. Every option strategy, however complex it might sound, however fancy names it might have, is built upon puts and calls.